Our next talk is by Mark Merlin, and he's talking on planning for and handling failures from open hardware, aviation to production at Google.
All right. Thank you. So it's working very last second. We'll see. Plus, minus, it is. All right. So thank you for coming. Let me put my timer of death. I only have 89 slides, so I'm good. And does it work again? Oh, it just failed exactly first time because I have to go back here and try. Wow, this is great. All right. Failures, exactly, right? Okay, so welcome to the talk. You can see already failures from the beginning. So basically, we all know about failures. Ideally, we know about other people's because we don't make failures, we don't make mistakes ourselves. Or if we do, we bury them as deeply as we can. But basically, it's the whole story of, and basically I'm going to talk, and you can read the slides. You'll get two different talks. They'll be close enough. The slides have a lot more information that I'll be able to talk in that amount of time. So I'll take questions at the end, which probably won't happen, which means grab me outside or tonight. And there will be a bunch of links too. So actually, if you want to take a picture of that slide at the beginning for the link, where you can have everything from there, you'll be better off. 1, 2, 3. And I'll warn you for the slide jokes in case you're typing on your laptop. So what can we learn from mistakes from other people, and especially the medical and aviation communities where a post-mortem is actually about people dying? In our field, we don't take it always as seriously because usually it's like, well, you know, nobody died. But still, sometimes it could actually cause that, especially when the fields mix. Since, as you know, we use computers now in aviation and medical instruments all the time. So hopefully this talk it won't teach you anything you should not already know, but it will hopefully teach you to be a bit more honest with things you already knew, but you were shoving aside a little bit. So never again, hopefully, you'll say, hey, is this right? I think I fixed the symptom. That's probably good enough, right? It shouldn't happen again. I have other stuff to do. And teach you a spidey sense. I hope that's how you spell spidey, because it told me the spelling was wrong. And basically, yeah, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. How often have you dealt with people who say, well, you know, the problem is fixed, so I can close the ticket, right? I'm sorry, the problem went away. It's not fixed, it just went away, so it's solved, right? Except, well, it's not usually. So yeah, bad. Don't want to hear that. Just for me, actually, I was coming back from one trip, be home a few days before coming here. My wireless for the first time had failed, and I was getting alerts while I was on the other side of the world, couldn't do much about it. Power cycled it, it was still failed. I logged in the Ethernet interface, toggled Wi-Fi, and then Wi-Fi started working again. Did I fix it? You already know the answer. No, I did not fix it. It's just a bug that I don't know about yet. I put some more equipment on it, so if it fails again, I have ways to remotely cycle it and remotely put it back in order, and if it happens too much, I'm going to get rid of it and get a new one. But there's only so many things you can do today. So basically, yeah, if it's not root caused, it's not fixed. Again, you should obviously know that. You want to make sure you understand what went wrong and why. Usually, you know this, it's the other people that you're working with who are always, well, not always, sometimes need to be reminded of that. So there's no such thing as, hey, it went away, so we're all good now, right? No, we're not. Now, if you're in a management role and you have people working for you, managing tickets in any kind, please don't look at how many tickets they closed. That just rewards them for getting rid of problems as quickly as possible and getting that number up. Doesn't work well. And who call? I mean, I'm sure you've all called support for some reason or another, and you know that, like they said, the problem went away while you're on the phone with them. So they say, okay, we're good, it's fixed. Like, no, it's not fixed, it just went away. I still need you to look into my line of the logs and tell me why it failed and why it's not going to fail again tomorrow or when I'm not home. So there are two kinds of mistakes you can make. The honest ones where clearly there's a lot of things in the accident chain, and we'll look at some of those. And the other ones where, well, you're being a bit impatient. How about not you? I was being a bit impatient. Hey, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. It'll probably be fine. You know, it's worked so far. If not, probably I'll fix it quickly. This is where you get in trouble when you run out of luck. And the third one, which is not one of the two. So if there's one slide, only one slide that you have to remember, this one. I don't know, I'm not going to date myself. There used to be a TV show called ER. People walked in the ER, they got treated for various things. From time to time they died because, you know, they were already in bad shape when they got in. And from time to time, the doctors would say, hey, we want to review this death. And whoever was in charge of that person coming in goes in an amphitheater just like this. It's fantastic. I'm actually in the spot of the one who didn't do it right. And all of you people say, hey, why do you do this? Are you sure that was right? Did you try that? Did you give it that shot of whatever that should have saved the person who just died? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I will never do it again, right? So the point being that it puts you in a state, in a place where it's not very comfortable and people help you think about things you may have forgotten under pressure. And working under pressure is very hard. So ideally, you want to be in that spot. But the idea of a postmortem like this, it's, you know, you go back to your decisions, and next time, especially when you're not under pressure, you think about being here and not wanting to be here, and not wanting to have to explain why what you did made sense at a time when it didn't. So if you're thinking, should I be doing this? Is that going to be okay? Then at the same time ask yourself, okay, now I'm going to be here, and they're all going to ask me questions. Do I have a straight answer that I felt comfortable giving? And the answer, if the answer is, maybe not, I'm not sure, then you have your answer. So when does this apply? Anytime you think it should, really. Anytime you're taking a shortcut. Doesn't mean you should never take shortcuts. You just think about it. How much can you break? Will you find out before other people do? How quickly will it take you to fix it? You weigh the pros and cons. So again, you know, if you ask me why do you do that, I can tell him, well, I looked at this, I looked at that, I thought I would be all right. I felt comfortable doing it. Thank you, I appreciate that. So if it all blows up, at least, you know, it was a careful decision because, you know, no matter what you do, if you make changes, you'll probably break things eventually. Earlier in my career, I was all so good and I knew everything. So I did not run out of luck much, which really did not make me a very good person in that field on taking measured risks and having a good story, at least not for every change I made. And over time, I realized, you know, the whole better be lucky than good, it runs out eventually. So if you have someone like I was, let's say 20 years ago, make sure that that person gets a little bit of a nice talk saying, hey, you want to think about changes, you know, if you screw up, everyone's gone, it's the middle of the night, no one's there to fix it, we don't want to be having this talk, so, you know, be mindful. So there you go, that was really the most important part of the talk. Now I only have, how many slides left? Like 70, so we're good. So there's a bit more. So hardware, I'll go very quickly through that. I'm just going to give you a mishmash of things. And the idea is I want to give you a bunch of examples in multiple locations, multiple fields, so you can start getting a pattern, not based on one example, and get more of a sense for things that can go wrong. So obviously, you know, safety goggles, no-brainer, you have two eyes. Either one is a redundant one or it's for 3D, it depends how you look at it. That's your own call. LiPos, which I have some of them here that were making beeps a bit earlier. The best batteries we have, they love to react either by giving you energy or nice fires. If you get such a fire, if you put water, it will be even a nicer fire. If you don't know about the Tesla that actually caught fire by hitting a concrete barrier, it took, I think, 4 days to the fire to go out, and the fireman said, we're not dealing with this, just let it burn. It actually self-reignited a few days later in the lot that it was in. So yeah, LiPos, right. Now, there are things you can do with LiPos. This is LiPo that crashed into a small plane accident where the two wings came out in flight. And it's a bit shorter at the end, but you'll notice it's still in one piece. It's not actually catching fire in my hands. I did take it home very, very carefully in a fireproof enclosure because basically when it's like this, you can see the silver envelope around. It's here to protect the lithium from ever seeing any oxygen. And it actually worked. But a previous, I was very careful at that time because a few years prior, I had another one that was perfectly fine. I took it home, it was perfectly fine, and it was in my garage, and it just caught fire on its own without being disturbed because it was halfway through a breach, the air finally got in and it caught fire. Could have been in my car and ruined my car badly. It just happened to be in my garage when I was there. I got very lucky. I just learned from that experience. So this also a little thing, they're cheap. If you have a LiPo, put them on. They will tell you the LiPo is running low. That way you will not damage it. It won't catch fire, but it will not be usable again. If you're using those batteries, 18650s, they're like AA's but bigger. Same thing, to get the ones with the protected circuit, that little thing you can see in the back. That will help you make sure that you don't have short circuits, and if you do, it will actually save the battery. Now, maybe you don't care about all this, but let's talk about things that you might care more about it, which is the phone you have in your pocket. I'm sure some of you remember the Samsung Note 7s that tend to catch fire, maybe in planes. It was bad. How did it happen? Is a Samsung a bunch of idiots? Well, not exactly, actually. It's a whole chain of things that happened. And basically, it was a big phone, needed a bunch of battery, and they thought, hey, we need a slightly bigger battery before shipping because we want X runtime. So they just put a slightly bigger battery. And then they had two manufacturers that had slightly different version of that battery. One was just a tiny bit thicker, not by much. The manufacturing made it so that the place they was in had a bit of scrap metal sometimes, depending on who built it. Okay. And then one problem with those batteries is sometimes when you charge them, they actually get a bit thicker. And if it gets thick enough against a piece of metal that breaches it, then you have air coming in, and then you have a nice low fire, and not profit, which is exactly what happened. So there's a bunch of these. You can see what the enclosure looks like. You can see that there's not much space for expansion. Obviously, Samsung learned from that experience, and so did other manufacturers who didn't have to have their own recalls. So moral of the story, I'm not here saying, oh, look at me, I'm so smart, Samsung should have called me. Really, it's a bunch of things that went wrong. All didn't look so bad. They did do basic testing. It's just that things changed a tiny bit just before they shipped. Christmas tends not to move. It's an annoying thing about Christmas, so they had to ship, and it wasn't Christmas, but whatever ship date they had. They didn't have enough time to do user testing with the final version. They had a previous version where they thought, oh, the battery's too small, so they put a bigger one. So the one that they ended up shipping, the buyers ended up being the first testers, and they did not work out so well. Another thing, not that I'm John or anything, but what I think I learned is if you don't have a fuse, you do have a fuse. You just don't know where it is, and you'll find out later where it is. I think it's, yeah. Spares, like especially, in a place where you don't have local stores, buy spares because things will go wrong, and it sucks to wait 2 weeks for a new one. Obviously, you all know this, but spare slide. And then one thing I learned is every time I'm somewhere and there's something I don't have, whether it's super glue or a special tool, I'm so annoyed. I take it as a personal failure. So now I have a 15-kilo backpack that has all the stuff I might potentially need, which amuses airport security every time I take it through. But to me, it's worth it. All right, so human factor. So this actually had no reason whatsoever but to distract you from all the slides and my talking. But there's actually a very small link, especially if you came last year to see the outfit I was wearing. So last year, I had an outfit that looked like this, panels using RGB LEDs called NeoPixels. And you can see there's a bunch of loose electronics, wires, numbers, which are countdowns to where everything explodes, because of course numbers that look red and move are probably counters. And well, airport security didn't like that so much. I had some festival securities that actually called the cops and said, this looks bad. And the cops said, why is it not counting down? Because it's not a counter. It's an amp meter. So an amp what? Okay. So long story short is I made a box to put all that stuff in so they wouldn't look so bad. And then I still have the numbers because I need to know what they are. But I put little switches on the side to turn the numbers off so they don't look as menacing when they're not on. That worked actually quite well. And this is supposed to be my profit slide where I went to the State of Trance studio in Holland with the outfit, and I was on the live stream. And I was going to be, yay, me, except my flight to here. Air New Zealand does not do TSA pre, which is a pre-check where you give all your information, your fingerprints, your whatever else they need to have. And then you go through a fast security so they don't bother you nearly as much. And I've been using this for years now, and it's actually been great. Air New Zealand does not participate with that, which meant that I didn't get TSA pre coming here, which meant I went through the normal security line where other people go. And that was not a very good experience. They looked at all this and said, what the hell is this? And I'm like, well, it's a battery with some computers and stuff. It's like, yeah, but this looks like a bomb. It's like, I know it's not. And we went up and back and forth for 20 minutes, like literally they called person after person. They called the SFO bomb expert that came and looked at it several times and said, I agree it's not a bomb, but if you take it like this and shake it, people might think it is. So we can't let you on the plane with that. So let's just put it at the bottom of the plane, where it's not allowed because it's full of lithium batteries that make planes catch on fire and kill everyone. So at that point I realized maybe telling that person that was not the best thing, so I just shut the hell up. And they checked it in for me in the bottom of the plane, and thankfully did not burn because I'm here. So even when you try the best, it does not always work. You know, I was going to be like all smug about look at me, and well, no, I still have to work about this. So I'll have to take out the things from the boxes, check in the bits that look scary, and take the battery separately. Software. All right. So Google. There are things that, so I've been at Google for 17 years now. There are things that Google has pioneered. That's the low battery alarm, which doesn't seem to work so well. Okay, I'll turn it off. No alarm means everything's good. So a few things that we're doing that were not standard in the industry then and hopefully are more now. It's not like we invented all of this, right? But the first thing is when something goes wrong, first you revert. You don't just discuss saying, my push was good. It's those people over there who screwed it over and they should fix it. I've been telling them for months. And while you're arguing back and forth, maybe even via email, so it takes even longer, everything is down, right? It's like, no, 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 none of that. It's whoever touched it last, even if the poor SRE who just pushed it and didn't touch any code, you revert. Doesn't matter if it's your fault. You revert to a good known state and then you talk about it. Code reviews, obviously, well, actually, let me go I have slides on each. So code reviews, unit test, blameless postmortem, and practice emergencies and recovery. So I'll go through these. Code reviews, obviously, you write code, all your code is perfect. It's the other people's code that isn't. I understand that. So is mine. But code reviews, they do help you actually re-review your code and look at it before you send it to someone else and explain to them why it does what it's supposed to do. And I'm sure you've done this. You reread your code while writing the Git log, whatever, and you realize, holy crap, this is wrong, or this code doesn't do anything. And then you fix it before anyone even sees it. And the good thing is if you don't work in a big company where you have mandatory code reviews, you can still do that on your own by submitting code to your Git log. Again, review the code, look at the diff, look at each piece, and explain what that code does in your Git log to yourself. It doesn't matter, no one will ever see it. While doing that, you find problems for sure. So yeah, the first reviewer should always be you. At Google, we also, and other companies, pair programming can be used, and if you do that, then you don't need code reviews because you have two pairs of eyes, and the second person who's hopefully looking over the first one saying, why is this doing what you think it is? Change requests. So if you're in ops, you're making changes to routers, to servers, to whatever. That one is not as obvious as it seems. If it's something that's not like so trivial and routine, you have to think about when you're going to take downtime if you have to, or make that change that's slightly risky, and what your plan is. Of course, you should always have a timeline of how long it should take. And if by X minutes it's not finished, or maybe hours, I don't know, you revert, and you have a revert plan. If you don't have a revert plan, it's like, are you really sure you want to be doing this? I understand sometimes there is no revert, but you need to have a good story about what's going to happen if it doesn't work. Same thing about, oh, I'll just do it at night when everyone's sleeping. Well, how awake will you be at 2 in the morning? And if you need help, is anyone else going to be there to help you? If you break another team that's sleeping because, well, it's 2 in the morning, they come in the next morning, they'll be down for 6 hours, they'll be pissed at you. So sometimes actually doing it in the middle of the day with everyone around is actually the best course of action, so you need to weigh that. TBRs. So one thing we have at Google, I say code reviews are not optional, but sometimes you just need to push something. You're down, you're an SR, you're on call, you got a page, you need to revert, and maybe no one's there to review the revert, or it's a trivial semicolon that's clearly missing that you know it's correct. So if you have that change that must be in now, and you can say, hey, I'm willing to put my job on it because I know it's safe, you can check it in with a TBR to be reviewed. You put someone's name there. It gets in the source tree. That person gets that code review after the fact, and then basically reviews it later on. So great power comes great responsibility. You're trusted, don't make mistakes, and if you do, well, then you may have a chat with your manager. Unit tests, obviously, you've heard of them too. So I know it's complicated. I can't just give everything in one slide. I see a lot of unit tests that are really just compile tests. And don't take me wrong, compile tests are still a good thing, right? You have a function, you know that if you put in 2, it gives out 3. But if you can, try to have fully functional tests. Like when I work on subversion triggers, I actually spun out a full subversion service from end to end. I actually ran the triggers as real subversion triggers. I didn't have mocks that pretend to have the service there. And I know it's not always possible, but if you can, it makes a huge difference in how reliable and trustworthy those tests are. CI/CD, so CQ/CI, commit queue, continuous integration. So in case you haven't worked with those, in bigger projects, when you check in code, before you can send it for review, it goes to commit queue. Commit queue is a bunch of unit tests that run on different platforms that you may not even have, and they all have to pass before you can send that code for review. Now you have some tests that are more expensive. They take a lot longer. They take special hardware that you don't have 200 of in a rack. And those are run as continuous integration. So what happens is you have those tests pick up tip of tree after it's already been submitted, gets that code, compiles it, and tests multiple changes at the same time. And if it fails, it goes back and it knows who made in those last 10, 20, 50 changes and emails them. Hopefully not 50. So you can find out and revert whatever broke. So cost issues of CQ/CI, unit tests are great, but they do have a cost. Either it's VM, if you're lucky, it's VMs. If you're less lucky, it's also hardware, so you need racks and racks of hardware. It could be ARM boards, could be whatever. And those require teams and money and staff. So that one you need to decide, how much you are able and willing to spend. Percent rollouts, save file updates. That's something I wish I would see more. When, let's say you're editing something like an etc aliases file for email, and it's a 5,000 line file, which I understand could be a database. When you push that, you should have some kind of automation that actually looks at that and says, oh, you just changed 50% of the file. Are you really sure you meant to do that? Oh, by the way, 49% is a deletion that you did because you don't know how to use VI. So that does happen. If you have things to catch that, it really helps, especially when you have less senior staff that's dealing with config files. Same thing like for DNS, when I was managing that, it was all text files, but it would spin out a complete DNS system, read all the config files, look at all the logs for errors, and then do test queries. And if all that passed, then it was allowed as a file that would get committed and go to production. Postmortems. So I mentioned blameless and the finger pointing. So by the way, there's a lot of links to the landing postmortem culture that you are welcome to look at later. There's a lot of really good things in that SRE book. So when things go wrong, again, revert first. Then if everyone understands what happened, well, okay, screw up, we know what it is, let's move on, let's not do this again. Sometimes it's a long chain of things, and like let's say the Samsung exploding phones. So in that case, anyone can request a postmortem saying, okay, I want to, have a study to see what happened, what we can do differently, how we can learn from this. And when you have a failure like this, you already paid the price of whatever went down, so you might as well learn from it. Because now the lesson is mostly free, you just have to go and gather it. So our postmortems state facts and timelines. It's not like, oh, those people screwed up again, so at this time this happened, then that happened, and it caused this, and it caused that. And the reader can actually make their own conclusion of what happened. Practicing emergencies. That one is quite interesting. I haven't seen many companies that do that because it's a little bit scary. We actually do take down real services at Google internally. We just take them down in various ways. Not at any time, any place, but we have a week that we have SRE teams that are in different offices. And let's say the main one that set up the servers will have disappeared in a horrible earthquake and swallowed by the middle of the earth, burning. And the teams are in other offices will be responsible for first being paged and realizing what's down, why, and failing over, finding out what to do. And they're not allowed to get help from anyone else. And that just makes sure that all your documentation is correct, your revert, your anything that you have that's supposed to work but that you never use is actually being exercised. It's a little bit like you have a backup generator that you need to run every so often, because if electricity does go down, it hasn't run in 5 years, it may never start. So it's a little bit like this. So that one, you have to be careful, because again, you could cause actual damage to in that exercise. And also the people trying to fix it could technically make it worse. So, have backups, be careful. This is like an awesome thing that I still remember. A single command, mkdir 755 with the -p. This seems fine enough, right? What does it do? It creates user local. Let's say that a local is not there. It creates user local first, and it creates the foo directory, and it applies the permission 755 on foo. If you're very careful about what I just said, it applies the permission 755 on foo only, not on local. What permissions does local get? Well, they come to the UMask from whoever ran the command. Not something you would expect, or that is even really documented. So we had exactly that, and what happened is it was an archive that was being created with a bunch of files to get pushed to production. The engineer who did it, everything worked because it was owned by him. The permissions were 700 on local, but he owned it, so it worked. The reviewer couldn't see that because the permissions looked okay, and then when it got pushed to production, it actually created a directory that was owned by root 700, and anything that wasn't root was not able to go there, and we had spectacular failures. The point being that you can't get everything right, but what saved us is being able to have monitoring, get paged right away, and we have an emergency virtual button that you push that stops all rollouts. So that you don't even know what's wrong. You just know that things are going down, you don't know why, you push the big red button, and then you look at it later. So yeah, another example like this is we have a disk erase that is being used in other collocations, meaning that colos that we don't own, to make sure that our server data is safe and our user data is safe, and it doesn't get recycled in the wrong way. They ran this once, and it didn't seem like it finished or something was wrong, so they ran it a second time. Turned out the first time worked perfectly fine. The second time, the automation looked at how many machines were left to erase. The answer was null. Turns out, due to a little bug that was never found until then, null actually meant all in that context. So the server said, okay, let me erase all machines, which it started doing beautifully and quite quickly because we have very nice and quick automation. It took down the entire colo, but good thing we have a few more. So anything that's destructive, rate limit, right? We should have known that. We screwed that one up. So even if you're doing this for a while, you can still forget it in places. Percent rollout. There's another one that happened I think last year. We have rate limits on any push, and in this case, the config file that got pushed to all the servers to say what to roll out and what speed had a small bug that triggered a parser failure, which took down all the servers that were rolling out everything, because they got the new file right away, and when they tried to load it, they all crashed. So it turns out we need to add one more level of indirection to have a percent rollout on the file that does percent rollouts. You learn from mistakes, right? So postmortems, as I have a few more links that you can read. But the idea is, it's learning from other people's mistakes, whether they're within your company or other companies. Google has some postmortems you can read. There's other companies that do the same. And not only you're like, holy crap, this is really interesting. I had no idea all those things could happen. But as you read enough of them, if you ever see something that looks similar enough, you'll be, oh, hold on, this could be going wrong. That's step one. The second one is if you read even more of them, you start growing a spidey sense where like, I feel something could be going wrong here. How about that? And then you can see problems before they happen. It's not 100%, but if you get some, that's always problems that don't happen. So from personal lessons, I'm a pilot, I also dive. One thing I learned very quickly is you need to have a plan for failure before it happens. Once you're in an emergency, your IQ goes down by a whole damn lot. You need to have a rehearsed plan because you don't have time to think. Another thing is temporary fixes. There's no such thing as a temporary fix. That's what you do before going home. Then everyone forgets about it, and it all blows up next week because it gets reverted because it never got committed or whatever. So if you have a temporary fix, no one's allowed to go home until it's actually made clean and checked in, or there's a high priority bug to fix it. And let's not forget to our SRA friends that whoever's carrying the pager should be told about this, so that if it blows up in the middle of the night, they know that the state is not how it's supposed to be, and they know what to do about it. You don't want them to be there next morning asking you, why? Why did you not tell me? All right, so I have a little bit more, but I'll basically go a bit quicker because I still have some slides to go through. Basically, aviation says, experience as a cruel teacher should give you the test first, and then if you survive, then you get the lesson. So we can definitely learn from aviation. Aviation, which is spelled A-V-A and Schön. So this one is a typical problem. It looks, just in case you don't know what's wrong, there's a circle around the part that is not quite right. I was like, why do we need a red circle? I think I can see the plane. So it had an engine failure, and don't laugh, it's actually, as a pilot, hard to find out which engine failed, especially right after takeoff when so many things are happening and they shut down the wrong engine. So yes, in that case you have a whole rollover problem because of power in one direction, not the other. So that wasn't good. That's a KLM flight that crashed into the Pan Am in Canary Island, I believe. When it took off, they were so pissed off of being there that long, and they just basically authorized themselves to take off. It's more complicated than that. There's a whole like 1 hour thing you can read about it. But it's really a human factor with like crews that had tens of thousands of hours, and they were like so conceited, like, I know what I'm doing, you know, we're flying home, we're running out of time. And yeah, everyone died in the blue plane, and half of the white plane also got decapitated by the first one. Yes, hydrogen is great. It actually is not as bad as you think, but little story is when they were trying to shoot those German blimps, they had to have different bullets to make holes first, and then incendiary bullets to put the hydrogen on fire, and it was not as easy as it seemed. However, it didn't work out for this one. All right, so what can we learn from aviation? One thing I learned is to be honest with risk management. I'm not the best pilot, I know that, and I take risks accordingly. It's all about not dying and killing other people, right? And it's really the whole learning about the way we all rationalize, saying, well, I need to go home. I know this is not quite right, but I can't, it will probably be okay, and I need to go home. And our brains are terrible at telling ourselves that what's not right is okay enough. And aviation, you know, it costs you. So yeah, denial is not just a river in Egypt. Just remember that. So if the fear of a postmortem or a bad review doesn't do it, then maybe the fear of dying will do it. And if it doesn't, then it will remove yourself from the gene pool. So it all works out in the end. Hopefully you just don't take anyone with you. So a few things about pilots. Yeah, there's a lot of small pilot accidents. Again, on small planes it doesn't matter as much. Hopefully they'll have no one or a couple of people in the plane. And remember, jokes about crashes are just plain wrong. All right, so automation. We'll look at a little bit about Tesla versus Waymo and Boeing versus Airbus, and then you're going to have more and more links that you definitely need to look at later because I can't go into details. But is it relevant to computers? Yes, automation is required for what we're doing at scale, and we need to use it, but it can also bite us hard, and that's very, very true for aviation. And for aviation, you need to know when to take over immediately when automation goes wrong. There are so many planes where things went wrong and people were arguing why the computer wasn't doing the right thing as opposed to turning the damn computer off and then flying the damn plane manually. And in our case, it would be turning off the automation that's doing bad things and then looking at what to do when things aren't on fire. So Tesla versus Waymo, Waymo would be the self-driving cars spin-off from Google. So I'm biased because obviously I work at Google and I have a Tesla. So Tesla has an interesting, bold plan to use computer vision entirely for driving. As anyone's gone to the Miniconf, we know that our little self-driving cars have worked most of the time. Thankfully, they have no one in them. Waymo decided that it has to work 100% because if things go wrong, the human is not going to be paying attention and they will die. And turns out, so far they've been right. There's been a few people in Tesla cars that have been killed because they were not paying attention and the car did bad things because It's only 98 or 99% there. So now let's look at Airbus. Air France 447 was that plane that you probably heard about that crashed in the middle of the Pacific, coming back, I believe, from Brazil. They were in a very bad thunderstorm. And they had 3 pilots, seasoned one and 2 more junior ones. The senior one was actually taking required sleep because they have to get rest. They can't just fly the whole 16 hours or whatever long that was. Bad timing while the pilot was sleeping, the good one. Bad thunderstorm happened. Now, rain everywhere, plane shaking, it's dark, you can't see the horizon. And the 3 pitted tubes, which are used to tell the speed how fast it's going, all iced up. So the plane automation, the computer that was actually flying the plane the entire time said, whoa, I don't have airspeed anymore. I lost all 3, so you take the plane. It's called alternate law. That takes off a lot of protections because they can't apply without all the instruments working anymore. And the pilots were kind of poorly trained to actually fly the plane, never mind in alternate law. So they didn't do so well. Now, to be fair, again, the plane is shaking, there's lights flashing, alerts, and when things like this are happening and everything's beeping, it's not always clear what the alerts are, even though it's telling you what they are, but your brain kind of freezes up a little bit. So the most junior pilot actually pulls up the nose so much that the plane enters a very deep stall. The stall warning eventually turns off because the plane is going so slowly that the programmer at Airbus say, well, that slow must be on the ground, there's probably an error or something. So for not annoying people, it just turned off the alert, and that's what happened in that plane. There's no more stall alert, so clearly we're not stalling, so he just pulled the stick even more. The other pilot was like, oh, no, I know what's going on, we're stalled. So he pushed the stick all the way down. At that point, they're so panicked that neither pilot is talking to the other one, or at least not sufficiently. They're never supposed to be flying at the same time. Second problem from Airbus is those sticks were not linked. There's no force feedback. They're both doing different things, and what the plane does is silently averages them. They both think they're doing something, and they're just canceling one another out. Everyone falls in the ocean at 3,000 meters per minute, and it took a long time to find the wreckage back. So the Airbus programmers obviously made a few assumptions that were wrong. I want to be hopeful that they learned from it, but because of lawsuits and how hard it is to update all the planes, I don't know what happened to that. Another Airbus where things worked out better, QF32 for all the Australians, had a terrible engine failure that actually threw pieces through the wing, severed a bunch of things, caused over 100 errors. And by luck, they had 4 pilots in that plane that day, and it took all 4 pilots to actually deal with all the errors, land the plane heroically, and everyone survived. You can read about it. It's a very, very interesting story. But the point being that Airbus just say, oh, I have an error, I'm displaying the error. I have another error, displays the error. We have 100 errors, bam, 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 on top. And you don't know if the wing's on fire, you don't know if an engine fell out, you don't know what's going on anymore because there's so many errors. So again, something they didn't quite plan for. So if you think Airbus sucks by now, well, yes and no. This you can read on the slide later. Countries like Indonesia, and I'm sorry if anyone here is Indonesian, they have so much trust in their pilots that this is the prayer card to make sure that if all the passengers pray enough to guide the pilots so that they hopefully can fly the plane, we'll get to destination. You have here 3 different religions to pick from. One of them gives you good weather on top of the pilots being able to maneuver the plane. Okay, so in places like that, I'm kind of happy that Airbus is actually flying, and then the pilot's just kind of telling the plane where it needs to go. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of running low here. They had one accident from aircraft investigation, and you need to look into that series, Mayday Aircraft Investigation, 19 seasons. I will take off all your time. You'll thank me later. They had a cable that was sending data, and for a bit flip, solar flare, whatever, it crossed 2 data fields, which told the plane that it was in a very bad stall, so it pitched all the way down towards the ocean. Thankfully, it was only 1, so it recovered. Then a few days later, same thing happened with a different plane. And they realized, holy crap, something is wrong. And it took them a long time to get to all the data bit by bit to find out that it was just a single data flip between 2 data samples. And that's easy to fix in software if you think about it, right? You just take the one before, the one after, you see that one is off by 100%, so you just take it out. So Boeing, yes, how much time do I have? Great, just enough time to say very bad things about Boeing. So I'm sure you've heard about the 737 MAX. There's a lot to read. You can spend more time than I'll have time here. They just want to compete with Airbus that had a new engine option called NEO, new engine option on their planes. That engine was not actually meant to fit on that airframe because it would scrape, so they had to move the engine up and forward so it would actually fit. When you do that, it changes the way the planes fly. If you put too much power, it pitches up, and normally when you stall, the first thing you do is you pitch down and you put more power. If you put more power, it pitches even more up, and bad things happen. So they could not fix it without redesigning the plane, which they didn't want to do. So they're like, oh, let's put a software patch called MCAS, which you may have heard about. What it does is it just tells the plane to not go up, and if you're putting more power, it will just pitch down and not listen to the pilots. Okay, fair enough. To save on money, it was rushed. Prime directive was to say the plane was unchanged, which was not true. It relied on an angle of attack indicator. There were only two, actually one in most planes. The ones that had the second one, it was not actually connected to the first one, so it was being ignored by that little software patch. And if you remember, Airbus had 3 sensors, because if you have 2 and they don't agree, how do you know which one is wrong, right? So really, they were short, way short. During certification, it worked enough to make the FAA happy. The FAA didn't say anything about, oh my God, there's only one sensor, what happens if it fails? That's kind of bad. Then the pilots weren't told about it, because Boeing did not want to make the plane sound like it was a new plane that they had to learn. Their marketing people say this is the same plane you had before. Not true at all. So the last thing, you had 2 planes crash, everybody died, right, because of that. How much money they tried to save? Well, I just gave you all the reasons, all the things they tried to do. They pushed it, they forced the engineers to make it happen, and told them, you'll just make it happen, we're shipping. So at least you're doing all this. You're going to get the MCAS software done by your best engineers, right? How much should you pay them? $50 an hour, 100, 200? I don't know. You tell me. Or you could just send it to India for new grads for $9 an hour, and then not really check the software when it comes back and not integrate it properly. That helped cut costs, except for the 300 people who died and the billions of dollars that Boeing is now paying in avoiding lawsuits, and upcoming billions they're still going to have to pay. So more stuff that you can read on your own, but you get the idea of how bad it was. This is not just to say, oh, look at Boeing, they're so bad. This is how much was pushed past engineers that said, oh my God, what are you doing? And none of those engineers actually called a newspaper, became a whistleblower, because they couldn't fix it internally, right? They were being ignored. But if you're that engineer and you know that those things can fail and people will die, do something. Call someone, call a newspaper, call the government, do what you need to do. And I'm very sorry that no one did that, because there are definitely many engineers who knew that this was wrong and they were being ignored. What the marketing people said is, well, you know, the pilots can disengage the system if it misfires, except it's not mentioned in the pilot's handbook, and they only had a few seconds to do it. How the hell do you debug something in 4 seconds when you don't even know it exists and what fuse to pull? So everybody died, not only once, but twice. And planes were finally grounded. Those are all the planes being built by Boeing that can't go anywhere. That's the parking lot where they used to have cars. They put the extra planes. And now the parking lot's all full, so they're not building planes anymore. I don't know how many billions they're going to have to pay, but it's not enough. And I'm not even, you know, personally, I would be happy if there was a bit of jail time going on, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. So, of course, that's the worst part, right? I hope we all learn from what Boeing did. I'm sure that Airbus paid attention. But the way things are going is, you know, in 10 years, we'll have forgotten, because that's kind of what we tend to do. I hope you won't forget. I hope you'll be there saying, hey, wait a minute, this is wrong. We should do something about it. Certification. You say, hey, the FAA, what did the FAA do? Well, you know what? These things are so complicated now that the FAA says, I don't understand. How about you soft code review your own thing and you tell me it's okay? Really? Well, this is actually what's going on. And the FDA, same thing. Oh, those computer things, we don't quite understand. Just make it right and tell us it's okay. How well is that working? So yeah, FAA, first of all, certification, you didn't do it. You had asked them to do it. And then the second time when the plane crashed, it was somewhere else in some other country. We don't really care. Do you know that after the second plane crashed, the planes were still not grounded? It took like newspapers to say, what the hell? Should we be flying those planes in the US? Then finally they got grounded under pressure from newspapers? Wow. So I don't have the answers to everything, but seeing all those things, you have things that sometimes you may be able to do as one person. You can't. You can make a difference. If you're in that place, if you're that one engineer who can fix those problems for medical devices or planes or anything else, make that difference. Small print, there you go, take a picture, read it later, as you can see how bad it is. It's bad. Very nice, interesting videos from actually learning from failures before they happen, so that when it happened to you, you're trained and you know what to do. I understand you're not flying airliners, but if you read about mistakes that happen in production to other companies, or code mistakes that people are making, then you can not make them yourself, hopefully. So a few more slides, you can read about them. You told me I was done, or I'm done, right? I need to shut up. So conclusions, learn from people's mistakes, continuous improvement. Be a whistleblower if you have to. Spidey sense, get one, grow one. Don't let people bully you. If it's wrong, you know it's wrong. Say it, do whatever you can. Be honest with yourself. If you know that you're kind of pushing it, you probably are. Take a breath, does it have to be really happening now? And it would be nice if all the aviation stuff and medical stuff were open source, so we can find those things and say, hey, wait a minute, this single failure here will cause everything to crash. I know I'm kind of dreaming on this one. So Q&A, I guess we don't have time, but you can grab me, you can take the slides again, and thank you for your time.